Hey guys, Andy here. So this week I've been playing with the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max, which is another budget device from Xiaomi. One of the things that normally suffers when manufacturers make their budget devices is the camera and the lenses. They're just not up to scratch, which is a pain because one of the biggest things that people want in a phone these days is a good camera. Or one of the things people always ask, what's the camera like? What's the camera like? Yeah, I just want something that's cheaper with a good camera. So I thought basically let's just do a separate video covering the different lenses in the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max, which is what we're doing today. So let's start off by just looking at what lenses there are on the Redmi Note 10 Pro Max. The main lens is actually 108 megapixel, f1.9, 26mm, regular wide angle. The secondary lens is an 8 megapixel f2.2, 118 degrees ultra wide. Now just to point out, sorry, the F number, if you're not sure what that means, that's about how wide open the iris, the shutter, can go, or something along those lines. Basically, a lower number means that it can open wider, get more light in, therefore it's going to be able to do a quicker shutter, or it's going to work better in low light. f1.9, that's okay, that's not bad. f2.2, and then we're moving on to f2.4s. So the macro lens is a 5 megapixel f2.4, and then it has a 2 megapixel f2.4 depth sensor, which I think is purely just going to be for helping of focus and portrait modes and stuff like that. I don't think there's a way of taking a picture with it. I think it is just there for assisting the other lenses, which is fine. And then we flip it over to the front. There's a pinhole camera on the front, which is a 16 megapixel f2.5 regular wide angle front facing. So then let's have a quick look at the actual app itself. It reminds me quite a lot of the stock Android camera app now, which is not a bad thing. So down the right hand side we've got all the different modes, and it does have a pro mode. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really muck around with this, but you can change the lenses, change the ISO, got white balance, all sorts, white balance, sorry, there we go. Exposure. So that's going to be handy for some people. Then we're on to video mode. You can video with the ultra wide angle. You can go 2x zoom, regular photo, same lens options, portrait mode, and then there are more options there. So those are your more options you can change. I don't quite know what the difference. I mean, you're just changing how they look, I suppose. At that point, you can customize them, and all of that. When we're in photo, we then also have options down the side, look, HDR, AI, lens, and here are the other options, your timers, so super macro mode is here, look. Pro color, to be honest, I didn't play with all of these. I'm not sure what pro color does. If I'm going to turn it back off again for the moment. Because there are actually a lot of options, and I was just more about, let's just see what these lenses can do, rather than looking at the software itself, I suppose, in some ways. So the main lens, I thought they were generally good, strong colours. In fact, the more I used it, I realised that maybe they're kind of slightly oversaturated. I've done a lot of cycling recently. A lot of times I take a photo, my bike's in it. My bike is kind of it's an orangey red, but in a lot of the photos that this took with the main lens, it looks just red, really, rather than orangey red. But there is good detail, I think, and it generally did a good job with the exposure. Although I think I took a couple where they looked slightly faded or overexposed. I think though generally it's a good, strong main lens for a budget device. It's reasonable in low light, so I took one where it was beginning to get dark, and then I took a couple where it was actually dark, and I thought it wasn't too bad. Night mode didn't make a big difference, but it did make a slight difference. And honestly, I probably generally wouldn't bother using night mode. If you just snap regularly, you've got a reasonably good picture. Then the ultra wide angle lens, which I think ultra wide angle is a bit of a must-have these days on phones. So it's good that it's there. Initially I thought, oh, is the colour lacking a bit? Is it a little bit faded? Because I would compare it to that main lens. But again, as the time went on, I think maybe the ultra wide had the colours right and the main lens was just a bit oversaturated. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think it wasn't too bad. It didn't do well in the low light, well in the dark basically. It did not look good at that point. As for the front facing lens, not as good as the main lens. I think the colours were generally quite balanced and there was quite good detail. The portrait mode was okay if you want that. I mean, they always look quite fake, don't they, when it is fake. And the front-facing lens was not good in low light either. If we move on to the macro lens, I've always thought macro is a bit of a gimmick, but actually, I mean, it's definitely not a necessity like the ultra wide, but it's kind of fun actually. And it wasn't bad. So some of the first macro lenses I ever used, probably on Chinese import devices, I mean, they were just terrible. The actual image quality was terrible. They were very low megapixel count. You wondered why they bothered. But I thought it was quite fun actually, this macro lens. There wasn't definitely any issues with sort of colour balance or exposure. The only picture I struggled with was when I was trying to take one of the flower outside because it was blowing around in the wind, so it was just a bit blurry. But otherwise, actually it wasn't bad. If we move on to video, so again, this is mainly using the main lens, and I think the colours just are a bit too strong perhaps. So when you see the grass in different bits of video, that is a very strong green, sort of bright green grass. Again, my bike would generally be looking quite sort of reddish, but it was actually quite smooth video, I thought. Sometimes it can struggle panning because it tries to get that mixture of lens stabilising, but hang on a second, you're panning, so I need to move. But it did a quite good job with that, I thought. In dim light, it was okay, so I did some as it was kind of just beginning to get dark. It still looked pretty good. At night, I thought it struggled a bit, although it's still quite crisp, and actually there wasn't much noise, and I think that's the thing. So when it tries to artificially generate light that's not there, that's when you get the noise. It just didn't bother doing that in the video that I took. It just said, no, it's dark. Yes, it is dark, but it still gave a good crisp image, actually. The front-facing camera, I'm still a little bit undecided because initially I thought, that's not very good. And then the second clip I took, I thought, well, that's actually not so bad. Maybe it's just slightly overexposed. Somebody did ask in the comments of like what the front-facing camera light is in low light. That I wouldn't say is good, but I mean, if it's just video calls, I think that's what they were talking about. I think it's sufficient. So all in all, I think the main lens is pretty good. The colour sort of issue, the colour balance, the saturation, maybe if you feel, maybe if you go into pro mode, you can probably work around that a little bit, or just some post editing, you can probably fix it. I think generally the detail and the quality and how sharp it was actually really good for a budget device. The ultra wide angle, yeah, actually again, so initially I remember thinking, this is not very good, it looks a bit faded. Actually I think it's probably pretty good. It's a pretty good lens, to be fair. Again, for a 260 odd pound device, not bad. Front facing okay, video I thought was quite good. Again, just maybe that colour balance thing that it could do with fixing. But all in all, for a 200, I paid 265. I don't think it's bad. I think Xiaomi are really sort of getting the hang of their camera thing. So I will be interested. I maybe will try and get hold of one of their more expensive devices, like the one they just announced, because perhaps I think that scored really high on the DxO markings. So that could be quite interesting. But let me know your thoughts. I've given you all the information, all the data, kind of, you can almost decide yourselves. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. I do read them all, so please do comment. I'll reply if suitable. But for now, my name's Andy, and I'll catch you all again soon.